Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, our weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Hello again, Thanasi.
Good to be here. Let's get into some wrestling.
In this week's episode, we're going to be reviewing WWE's Smackdown and Raw episodes going into Crown Jewel, as well as giving our predictions for the event happening this weekend. Later on, we're also going to be looking at what happened over on AEW, including the setup of Adam Copeland's first pay-per-view match with AEW, which will be a six-man tag alongside the Icon Sting and Darby Allin. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. On that note, let's get started. And to begin with, we're going to be reviewing Smackdown. Thanasi, Smackdown specialist, take it over.
Allow me to take over, as you say. So we open up with the World Championship contract signing, during which LA Knight shamelessly interrupts Roman Reigns' entrance. He just walks past the champ and sits at the head of the table and demands that Roman Reigns acknowledge him. Roman, in response, belittles his opponent, who has his maiden world title shot coming up against him at Crown Jewel. And of course, it's a contract signing, so the customary scuffle sees LA Knight drop Jimmy Uso with a back suplex through the table. The opening match of the evening is Carlito and Santos Escobar in tag team action against Street Profits. Now, this match wasn't bad by any means, but the storyline highlight was when the Tron showed Logan Paul beating down on Rey Mysterio backstage. So Carlito went back to help. Santos just tried to quickly finish the job, but he actually succumbed to the Revelation, which is the neckbreaker spinebuster combo that the Street Profits use as their finisher, as their tag team finisher. A special mention backstage on this topic that Kevin Owens had a stare off with Logan Paul because KO was wearing a Rey Mysterio shirt. And then, of course, a wonderful moment where with a single strike, a single swing of the fist, Kevin Owens knocks both Grayson Waller and Austin Theory to the ground. The second match of the night was Chelsea Green taking on Shotzi Blackheart. Simple affair here. Shotzi wins with a crucifix roll-up. Next up, John Cena faces off with Solo Sikoa, whom he takes on at Crown Jewel this weekend. Now, I honestly thought that they would be saving this match for WrestleMania, so we might have more to come. But in any case, Cena cuts a typical Cena promo where he raises his voice at the end of sentences and he says that he must win. Then Paul Heyman comes out and he says Cena was his own number one draft pick from OVW back when Heyman was in charge of SmackDown in the mid-2000s. And he puts Cena over as a talker, but he says that he can't win the must win. And this is when Solo jumps and obliterates Cena with the Samoan spike. Third match of the evening, Dragon Lee takes on Cedric Alexander, and Lee manages to get the victory here with his finisher, which is I'm not sure what it's called, but it's a three-quarter face lock flipped backward into a reverse DDT. And at the end, Alexander shows his respect to the recent NXT graduate with a handshake after the match. Before we get to the main event, Bianca Belair cuts a promo. Essentially, she just declares that she's coming for Damage Control and she wants to take each of them out, with EO being the last one on her list. And this is going to get her back on track towards reclaiming her women's championship. Final match of the night, main event of the evening, is LA Knight versus Jimmy Uso. I'd say this one was a pretty standard TV match overall. A pretty standard TV main event in all. The finish comes when Jimmy looks for the second Uso splash, but LA Knight has that quick step up superplex out of nowhere that we've seen before, and that looks visually, it's awesome. And he follows that up with a BFT, securing the pinfall victory. Roman Reigns, however, does run out to spoil the celebration, but he's not quick enough because LA Knight sees him and hits BFT on the Undisputed Champion for a babyface triumph show close. Effectively, this was the go-home show because I believe most of the SmackDown roster will either be in transit to West Asia during the next episode of SmackDown, or otherwise they're going to just tape stuff ahead of time so that they have some content. But basically, that's the recap of the show. Dimitri, can I get your thoughts on, did you think that Solo Sikoa versus John Cena is a good call to have it at Crown Jewel, or should we be saving this one for WrestleMania?
Oh, I don't think it should be for Mania at all, to be honest. I don't think it does anything. I think having it now actually works better because it's fitting in the story of, he actually has some time, so they've actually been able to build it up. Whereas if this were a Mania match, this would have been the only segment they had of it, the entire build. We wouldn't have had the tag match. We wouldn't have had the scuffles leading up to it. Like right now, I actually think they've built up to make this seem like a match that makes sense. And I know that you're the perennial John Cena hater. I actually thought this was one of his better promos in the past couple of years, to be honest, because he made it feel a lot more personal. That this was a match, and what I appreciated as well is that he kind of is selling the fact that he needs to beat Solo Sikoa to just validate himself as a star, as the continual star that he is, which means to me that he's saying Solo Sikoa is a match that is worthy of him actually maintaining his own status. So I actually think in going into this that they've done a good job of making it seem like Solo doesn't need the win. Solo is going to get that rub of just being with John Cena again in the ring.
Look, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you here because I think during the whole promo, there was such a limit, and this is also with Heyman's contribution as well, so it must have been in the dot points, but there wasn't a lot of focus on what does Solo Sikoa represent. It's more just, it's a must-win for Cena because he hasn't won in X hundred, X thousand amount of days. It was all very much Cena focused. Like, can he keep up? Can he still do it? And I struggle to believe it because this is not obviously the 90s. This is the 2020s. A man in his mid to late 40s, or basically his mid 40s, where Cena is still able to be in really good shape if he takes care of himself. And Cena does take very good care of himself. You look at his shape, he looks like someone who's able to keep up in the ring. So this idea of you've still got it, or do I still have it? What if I can't? What if I've lost it? I find it so hard to swallow. It's ridiculous. We should have made Solo Sikoa a much bigger focus here, in my opinion. But leave that aside. Did you want to talk a little bit about the main event?
I'll talk about the main event, but I just got to say this. John Cena has lost it, if I'm being frank. Like, these concerns that he's raising are actually true. Do you remember the match he had with Austin Theory at Mania?
My view, I remember that match. I think he just didn't give a damn. That was Cena with minimal effort. We've seen people like Brock Lesnar, right? You look at Lesnar. Lesnar can give you a 4 or 5-star match if he cares.
It's not the same, bro. It wasn't a thing of he didn't give a damn. It was a thing of he's not wrestling regularly. And believe it or not, John Cena is one of those guys that doesn't have the same ability to just come in once a year and ace it. That, to me, that's what it was. And that's why in this most recent run, I'm a bit more excited now for his singles match because he's got a little bit more of that rust off of him. I'm not saying it's going to be a great match by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that his concerns are true because I don't think he's won a singles match in like a couple of years now. So you can understand. I know that he hasn't wrestled that many matches, but the point is, with time, he's not wrestling at all. And then when he does come back, he's not able to do it on his own. You can understand his own concern storyline-wise of, am I actually capable?
Look, storyline-wise, I get it. But the thing is, either retire or move on because he's at the stage in his career where he's supposed to be putting people over.
Okay, well, I think that's very much just based on your own bias, if I'm being frank. I remember.
Let's agree to disagree. Let's talk about the main event where we've got two wrestlers in their prime.
Okay, Jimmy Uso, I think he's seen better days. I think he needs a bit more time these days. He's not getting the same time he used to. But look, it was just a match. Like, I didn't think there was anything special about it. We knew exactly what was going to happen. I was more impressed with the fact that the LA Knight managed to get a BFT on Roman Reigns, but apart from that, I don't think there was much to it.
Well, that's all for my SmackDown. Did you actually? But before I just get to the end of my SmackDown, can I just make this point, if you'll allow me? I want to talk a little bit about uh the Kevin Owens face off with Logan Paul, because it's quite unclear at the moment exactly where Kevin Owens is going to line up. But he did tease that he wanted to wrestle Rey Mysterio. He did want to wrestle some of these veterans. And, like, obviously, I don't want to say too much about it because it was a backstage segment, it was very quick. But the fact that he did have that, he was wearing the Rey Mysterio t-shirt, and we've seen in the past that when he wrestled Rey Mysterio on a house show, he made a big point about it. It was like a long Facebook post for him. So potentially we've got a tease coming up here when Logan Paul eventually switches to LA Knight. And I'd be really keen for Rey Mysterio versus Kevin Owens feud. I'm sorry for interrupting there and just talking over the top, but I just wanted to have that view put out there.
I'm glad you brought it up because it made me think a lot more about the fact that if Logan Paul was willing to commit to, say, a 6-month schedule up till next Mania, I wouldn't be against him having a reign with the championship and having these sorts of matchups with guys like Kevin Owens, guys like the LA Knight potentially. So I'm glad you brought it up because I think his character work sort of gets undervalued because he's very much leaning into the heel persona in a way that I actually think is productive. Like I don't think we're in a position anymore where we just don't want him on our TV. I think we're very much in a position where we actually want to see Kevin Owens stunning him. We actually want to see LA Knight give him the BFT. And that's a good position to be in, I think. Don't you agree?
I think I might have misspoken, because what I meant to say is, with Logan Paul now probably going to win the US title, that's going to put him in a program with LA Knight to eventually take the strap, which frees up Rey Mysterio to go into a program with Kevin Owens. I think that's more what I was interested in. I can't really say that I would be a big fan of Logan Paul versus Kevin Owens. I don't know if their styles would exactly match up very well, but I do think Kevin Owens' style with Rey Mysterio can match up and produce something good. So that's what I'm more excited for.
Okay, well, that's a lot on SmackDown. So let's just move on to the other weekly programming show they've got, which is Raw. So a quick rundown of what happened. So it started with Judgment Day having a promo exchange with Sami Zayn. This set up Sami Zayn versus Damian Priest later in the night. And this quickly transitioned into Ricochet versus Dominic Mysterio, which Dominic managed to win with a dirty roll-up pin. After that, we had our Alpha Academy face off with the Creed brothers in their main roster debut, which they actually managed to win. It's a very impressive debut outing for the NXT stars. There was a Judgment Day hype-up scene that kind of reminded me of Vince McMahon hyping up the Spirit Squad before they're going to take on DX. I just thought it was quite amusing. And following that, there was a Miz TV segment with Gunther. And I thought this was a really nice exchange where it felt very real. And that's what I appreciate about it. I don't know, how did those segments land with you, Thanasi? Both the Judgment Day hype up and the Miz TV segment.
Well, I wasn't reminded of Vince and the Spirit Squad because, of course, there was no DX doing a voiceover and talking about smacking bottoms or anything like that.
Wait
so
for
I didn't
next
get
week.
that vibe. Well, potentially. Look, it was a big upset victory with the Creed brothers taking the win over Alpha Academy. And my initial thought upon seeing that was they're really probably looking to build the tag division ahead of the split of the titles, which is, you've got to assume it's not far away when they're bringing in tag teams and actually, for the first time, actually having some kind of a focus on tag teams on the main roster. On the point about Miz TV and featuring Gunther, I completely agree with you, and I have nothing further to add other than the fact that I like the fact that Giovanni Vinci did have that quip about Maurice calling Miz her sidekick, and then, of course, Miz transitioning towards sowing the seeds of dissent. So I've never been a big fan of Miz as a babyface. I don't think he works as a babyface. But this was a good little segment, and hopefully it doesn't mean Miz is transitioning to babyface long time.
Well, on the point you raised earlier about the tag division, with this then led into the main roster debut of DIY as a tag team properly now, like together, not just as a one-off, going up against Giovanni Vinci and Ludwig Kaiser, and they got the win. And again, on your point, this along with the Alpha Academy Creed Brothers match was the most exciting thing to me on the show, really. And I appreciated that we had 4 different tag teams that aren't in the title picture right now, just going at it. And it adds all these potential opportunities moving forward. So I really liked this match as well. But following that, Shinsuke Nakamura had a video where he's basically saying, where is his next challenger going to be, his next opponent? Then there was a match between Candice LeRae and Xia Li, and unfortunately for the 2 wrestlers, the most interesting thing that happened here was Michael Cole thinking he was back in 2008 and announcing Candice LeRae's Candice Michelle, which actually got called out by Wade Barrett. So I thought that was quite amusing.
It was called out by Wade Barrett, and Michael Cole did acknowledge it as well.
Yeah, and I think you could tell that the mistake stuck with him because they referenced it as the show went on as well. Yeah. There was a nice Drew McIntyre video package that I quite appreciated. That's basically just outlining his thoughts, the things that he's been saying the past couple of weeks about how he's had moments and then the moments have been taken away from him, and when he's felt like it's been his time to really have his one defining moment with the entire WWE universe, it's been taken away.
I thought this was a fantastic package, actually. I think these are the kinds of things that you want to see on go home shows, right? It's packages like this, because this one is not exactly the kind of package that you'd play before a match to hype the match, but it is really there to drive the story home and to really prep you up. And I liked the closing line, which was, Seth Rollins was my first title defense in 2020, and now I'm going to be his last. I thought that was a really good, strong piece, a strong line to finish the segment on.
I loved that line until I thought about it for 2 seconds, and I remembered that his first title defense was actually against the Big Show.
Let's not work that way.
Okay, but
let's recognize the first real defense.
Yeah, look, I still thought it was a great line, just a little nitpick, that's all. And on that, if talking about lines, Seth Rollins had an in-ring promo immediately following this, and that's it. We debated this as when we watched it, not together, but in our own separate time. And he said, "Cry me a river." Now, I'm not saying this is a reference that, like everyone else is, that this means Punk is coming back to WWE, but I certainly felt like it was a reference to that incident. Did you feel the same way?
Look, I mean, I try to keep myself well informed with the turns of phrases of the English language, and this one is a very common one. And when that happens, I try not to read into things too much.
Yeah, but it's not that common. Like, it's not something in wrestling that you'd hear every year. Like when Jack Perry said it, it wasn't just a bit of phrasing that everyone else uses. And so for me, I definitely think it was a subtle thing because Rollins has that in him. Like, remember when they asked him about Punk a couple months ago and he said, "Oh, I don't want him in WWE, he's a cancer." Like, that was very clearly a reference to the rumors that were going out, the statements going out from, I think, was it Jericho calling Punk a cancer?
I think it was more just posed in the form of a question. But yeah, look, to be honest, I mean, all I could think of as opposed to that line, I didn't pick up on that. I completely washed over it, and all I could think was about Seth Rollins being in the mid card of Monday Night Raw again. Right? Yet again, he's not in the main event, and he's the world champion. That's all I could think about.
Well, he may have been in the mid card, but he did have, for my money, the best match of the night with JD McDonough, which he managed to win. And this was apparently his first singles match on Raw in 4 months, which I thought was shocking, to be honest, because he's been presented as quite the workhorse champ. So that's quite interesting. Then we had a Natalya Chelsea Green trick or street fight. Chelsea Green and Piper Niven dressing up as Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, which I thought was excellent. And Chelsea Green actually got the win here, which I thought was quite impressive for her. So I thought good for Chelsea Green.
She even kicked out. She even kicked out, if I can say, of the power bomb on not on the thumbtacks, on the candy corn. Yes. So that's a big brutal moment for her.
Yes. And then this led into the main event, which was Sami Zayn versus Damian Priest, which sort of had a disappointing finish with a DQ. And this sort of led into a skirmish between Jey Uso, Cody Rhodes, Sami Zayn, and the Judgment Day. So that was how we're closing Raw going into Crown Jewel. I thought, all in all, it was. I think there were some bright moments from the episode, definitely bright moments, but I think overall that it didn't feel like I feel like maybe the structuring of the card could have been different, because I think ending with that Drew McIntyre Rollins stuff would have been a lot more powerful.
I certainly agree. And I think, because I know we're going to go to Crown Jewel next, I think I've been able to at least partially pinpoint why I found this to be such a disappointing go home show. And I think the problem is structural, because what you've got is a 3-hour show building up to first of all, a 3-hour pay-per-view, but only half of that pay-per-view is going to be built on from this go home show. What do I mean by that? Of the 7 or 8 matches that are scheduled for Crown Jewel, only maybe 3 or 4 of them are relevant to Monday Night Raw's roster. So that means that just inherently, you're going to have a lot of content on Monday Night's Raw go home show that is not actually going to build towards anything for Crown Jewel. And I think that really fed into the disappointment for me. I think it's genuinely a structural issue. And certainly it's one of the arguments, not the linchpin, but it's one of the arguments in favor of brand-specific pay-per-views.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I completely get your point. I actually think everything you said has validity. For me, it's just a personal preference of I actually don't mind it as much, because I like the idea of there are still things going on in the show, and then certain things are also transitioning to the pay-per-views, and then the only thing I want at that point is just rotation. So don't just have the Intercontinental Championship on Raw every week and then 1 or 2 pay-per-views a year. Have it be on half of the pay-per-views, but you rotate that and say the US Championship. So those two never have to necessarily be on the same one, but they're constantly in the picture. So I don't mind the idea of having other things being built up to even on the go-home shows. I just mind the fact that it feels like the same things get built up for the pay-per-views, and so people are just only existing on TV and not getting that big like blow off for their feud or for a title on the pay-per-views. That's my angle on what you raised.
Yep.
But everything you said, I think, has validity. Now, as we know, Thanos, this weekend is Crown Jewel. That's what it's all about. And we like to do our predictions competitions, just for a bit of the own personal feud rivalry between us as brothers. So are we ready to have another go at it and see who's going to come out victorious this time?
Let's do a predictions comp.
All right. Well, we're going to start off with the World Heavyweight Championship match between Seth freaking Rollins and Drew McIntyre. I know where I'm leaning on this one, Thanasi, but I'm going to throw it to you first. How do you see this one playing out?
As much as I would love to see Drew McIntyre win, there's a part of me here that sees McIntyre going properly heel after this. And what that means is he can't win it because Damian Priest is holding the briefcase. So I think, if anything, it's more likely that we're going to get a cash-in at Crown Jewel. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, but my safest way to go is that Seth Rollins does win this match, potentially does not walk out of Saudi Arabia as champion, but certainly does win the match.
I completely agree with you. This is the first time in a little while that I'm actually backing Seth in the match. I would like Drew to be world champion again, but something just tells me that it won't be here. All right, well, we're in agreement there, so let's see if we also agree on the next one, which I have a suspicion we might, and it is the fatal 5-way match for the Women's World Championship between Rhea Ripley, the champion, against the challengers Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, Zoe Stark, and Raquel Rodriguez. Now, firstly, we've said already before that we're not a fan of 5-way matches. It feels like they just haven't bothered to create a story between competitors. And honestly, for that reason, I feel like it just does not make even 1% sense to have anyone win besides Rhea Ripley.
Yep. I look. I wish I could put it better than that, but I seriously can't, and that is why I'm also going for Rhea Ripley to retain.
Okay, so we're still
We're still deadlocked.
We're still deadlocked. The next match we have is the US Championship match between Rey Mysterio and Logan Paul. Now, this one is quite an interesting proposition, all things considered, don't you think?
It is an interesting proposition, but I do feel like we're going to fall into the same trap because, as we've just done, this segment on the podcast, the SmackDown review, it does seem as if we're really going to be putting this strap on Logan Paul. We're going to be strapping a rocket to the bloke in order to get those many, many valuable views and viewers. And my prediction genuinely is that it is going to be Logan Paul winning at Saudi Arabia. And I do think that later down the track, LA Knight will take that strap off him. But I do think that he's being set up to defeat Rey Mysterio. Probably not clean, because Rey Mysterio does have the LWO to help him. But this is where I see it going.
Well, I think Rey's going to retain. I think there is a good story that could be told with Logan getting it. And quite frankly, as Aussies, I've never really cared that much about the US Championship.
Huh.
So, for my money, it's like, yeah, give it to Logan, whatever. Like, to me, that's the appropriate title to give to him. That doesn't feel like it's affecting anything else really for us. At least that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
But I still think for some reason Rey's going to retain just because I feel like Logan probably doesn't want to commit to a schedule. And you have to think that like if he's only going to have it for a week or two, then like does it matter?
That's an interesting point that you say, because what if he actually does lose the belt? What if he wins it here but loses the belt on TV to LA Knight? What if he's actually used as a transitional champion?
It is possible.
Yeah,
but I'm not a fan of transitional champions, to be honest.
that's fair enough. I see your point of view.
All right. Well, from going from the American title, we're now going to go into the American Nightmare. So it's Cody Rhodes versus Damian Priest. How do you feel on this one?
Look, this is singles action. If there were a championship involved, there'd probably be other considerations to make. But it is fair to say that Cody has been built up as super strong. And I think that pulling into this idea of a potential cash in, like we mentioned before, of Damian Priest cashing in on Seth Rollins, if he's frustrated at a singles loss, he could come back at the end of the night in order to win his pride back, and by winning that, thereby winning the championship. So I think I am going to have to go with the American Nightmare winning this one. In spite of the fact that we could have dirty finishes that allow him to lose and for Damian Priest to go over, but my prediction is Cody Rhodes.
I think Priest's going to win via dirty tactics or interference. I actually think both can get away with a loss here. I feel like neither of them have momentum that feels like it's going to get shot dead in the water if they lose here. Which is a good place to be because it kind of means that creative-wise, whichever decision they go with, doesn't feel disastrous. But I do think Priest's going to get the win here just to give him that really big victory. Because it would be a really big victory for him to claim, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And I think that potentially it could build more into the Survivor Series build as well. Because Crown Jewel has felt very strongly as a B pay-per-view. Everyone's been thinking about Survivor Series, which I guess for a long time it was considered the fourth of four. So it's great to see that focus has reshifted towards Survivor Series this year.
Okay, well, the next match we've got is John Cena, apparently the GOAT, versus Solo Sikoa. We've talked about this at length in the show, but I mean, the way they've built it, like, there's only going to be one victor here, right?
Well, yes, that is how wrestling works. Only one person can win. And I believe in this situation that it is going to be one Solo Sikoa.
Oh, okay. That's not where I'm going.
Since you're going the other way, let me give you my rationale. My thought is that this potentially, and I'm thinking very highly of WWE here with long-term storytelling. But I think that Cena having this long period of losses or losing singles matches, it's going to eventually feed into him retrying to get that 17th world championship. I think that might be where we're leading into with that. So copying another loss to Solo Sikoa kind of like feeds into that. Just, can I do it anymore? Do I have it in me to go for that number 17? And at this point, just keep pushing down and making us wonder. That's how I think. You apparently feel a different way though.
I think the exact same thing, except the opposite way. I think if he loses, it would make less sense for him to go, do I have it in me? Whereas I think he wins here and goes, I've still got it. That means I can, yes, I can go for the 17. I can break the record. So I think it's going to be using the victory to hype up the idea of, one day he might. And I think we all kind of feel like one day he will. So I think that's what they're doing. Though I will admit, I think we're talking a little while down the road because right now the title picture, I think there are way more interesting possibilities.
Oh, certainly. Certainly.
Okay, well, the penultimate match of Crown Jewel is, for our predictions, that is Io Sky going up against Bianca Belair for the WWE Women's Championship. This one is another interesting proposition to me. This is a rematch of an earlier pay-per-view match between the two, notably the one that took place at Backlash. I think this time Io Sky is going to get the win over Bianca Belair.
See, I was feeling that way as well. However, with that promo that Bianca Belair cut, I guess the way that I'm seeing it is when someone tries to go through an entire faction and then eventually end up at the champion, it very frequently ends up in triumph. However, that being said, I would prefer that Bianca Belair does succumb to the dark side and join the Street Profits and Bobby Lashley. And I think that copying a loss and sending her heel might be a better way to go about it. So in the vein of this is what I want to happen, rather than thinking about what I predict will happen, I'm actually going to agree with you and go with Io Sky here. But I would like the booking to be right. That's all that I'm hoping for.
Well, that's it. This leads us into the main event, which is our tribal chief, Roman Reigns, versus the megastar, L.A. Knight. Yeah. And this is obviously for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. This is one of those matches where I know in deep down exactly how it's going to play out, but wouldn't it be so out of nowhere and just kind of wonderful if LA Knight actually did achieve the win?
Have you seen all the I think the AI generated or photoshopped images online of people showing a graphic of LA Knight hoisting up the undisputed title in a crown jewel venue? Have you been seeing those? Because it just seems like the whole world is on board with exactly what you've just described. We'd love to see LA Knight become world champion. But it is exactly like you say, it's that conflict between the heart and the head. As much as we'd love him to be world champion, you just can't you can't accept the idea that he's going to be the one to defeat Roman Reigns and at Crown Jewel, no less. Right? It's gotten to the point now where Roman just has to lose at a WrestleMania, and this is not WrestleMania. As much as they try to make it seem like it's on that level, this is a super glorified house show, and Roman Reigns will be retaining. It's like one of the three certainties of life: death, taxes, and Roman wins.
Especially in Saudi Arabia. One day I want him to go to Saudi Arabia and just sing the line from American Dad, where he just goes, "Here in Saudi Arabia," and just serenade the whole crowd the same way Drew serenaded the crowd back in Clash at the Castle.
I thought you were going to say something potentially more appropriate and potentially more offensive. I thought you were going to say that he would actually go and like open the show by singing the Saudi Arabian national anthem.
Oh,
because it's essentially like his home turf. He just doesn't lose anywhere, but especially in Saudi Arabia.
I mean, that would be hilarious. And yes, probably very insensitive.
Yeah.
All right, well, on that very somber note, let's move on to AEW. We're going to start with the latest episode of Collision. So, Thanasi, you have the con. Take us through Collision.
Let's go through Collision. The opening contest of the match was Jay White, the Switchblade, versus AR Fox. I describe this as a relatively standard affair where AR Fox uses the senton variations to great effect, however. He uses outside dive sentons, he uses a springboard senton, a senton bomb, if that wasn't enough. But however, the Blade Runner does give Jay White the victory here, which is exactly what we would have expected. And a nice little funny finish to the match or to the segment. MJF appears at ringside and narrowly fails to steal back the Triple B because, of course, he's going to be wrestling later on in the night. He's actually showing up at Collision. And why not try to take the belt back? He doesn't succeed, however, and he runs through the crowd and heads back to the locker room. Following this match, BCG sticks around. Austin and Colton Gunn wrestled Dalton Castle's boys from Ring of Honor, that is, in a glorified squash match. So we get 2 Bullet Club Gold matches to open up Collision before the third contest of the night, which is a Fright Night fight for the Women's World title. It's essentially AEW's version of the trick or street fight that we saw on Raw, or that common stipulation. And it's Abaddon taking on the champ Hikaru Shida. The champ expectedly retains, but her celebration is interrupted by timeless Toni Storm, who was stealing focus by lounging around on the announce table. And it seems to be a recurring theme, which you might take us through a little bit later on Dynamite. Now, Samoa Joe comes out and he receives a loud as hell Joe, Joe, Joe chant from the crowd. He's defending his TV title against Rhett Titus from Ring of Honor. Joe actually does observe the code of honor before the bell rings. Like, he shakes hands clean, but it doesn't really last long because Rhett is eventually going to succumb to the Coquina clutch. Rhett, of course, is also a former Ring of Honor TV champion. Maybe that explains the handshake. But he does get the tap out victory, and what we find out is his 17th successful defense. Ricky Starks takes on Dax Harwood in singles contest with the House of Black watching from the crowd. Now, Ricky, he often hits an old school, which is reminiscent of The Undertaker's move, but he steals a different Undertaker move this time. He hits a leg drop on the ring apron. Starks also hits a pile driver, and that's the move that wins him the match. So he actually gets a victory there. The heels outnumber, and I know, Dimitri, I'm not going to ask you to comment too much about it, but just briefly, you like it when they win with a pile driver, right?
I like it when the pile driver ends the match. Like, I'm not that fussed about using it, but if you're going to use it, end it there. So yes, I was happy in that sense, very much so.
Well, that was good from a kayfabe aspect, but also just from a general storyline aspect. The heels enter the ring, so that the House of Black come into the ring for a confrontation. And the heels, these three, and Ricky and Bill, outnumber the baby faces. And who's going to make the save but Los Ingobernables with the in-ring return to AEW of Roosh? And it looks like they're back as baby faces. So we've been seeing for many weeks vignettes where they're coming back or they're hyping up a return. And finally, they are back in the ring, not wrestling just yet, but we should soon be seeing them in a wrestling capacity as well. And that's going to be a really good addition to both, I assume, Ring of Honor roster, but also AEW's main roster. Next match is Claudio Castagnoli squashing a jobber called Hot Sauce something. I couldn't actually get that on my notes, but that probably explains to you exactly how far we went with that. And we've also got a backstage segment. And Dimitri, I am going to ask for your input here before I go into the main event, because the backstage segment is Samoa Joe demanding, or rather offering, his services to MJF in the upcoming 8-man on Dynamite in exchange for a world title rematch. Dimitri, do we want to see Samoa Joe versus MJF again?
Yes. I would add more detail, but the reality is they're two excellent wrestlers. They had a great match the first time. I'd love to see them go again, and potentially on a bigger platform. So not just an episode of Dynamite, potentially the New Year's pay-per-view or further beyond it. I would like to see them go up against each other again.
That's a great point, yeah, because AEW is going to have one on the 30th, I think it is. For us in Australia, it's going to be New Year's Eve. But yes, that's an excellent point that I didn't even think of, because I was putting my mind all the way ahead to Revolution and saying that would be excellent.
That would also be excellent.
That I wouldn't have a problem with that. But the thing is, we've got that pay-per-view coming up towards the end of 2023. I think that's a great place to put it. And as you may note a little bit later, and I hope that I don't steal your thunder here, but at the top of Dynamite, Adam Cole via video chat did suggest that MJF take the offer, so showing that Samoa Joe is an excellent candidate to team up with. Just showing that the absolute strength of the near 40-year-old Joe. However, before we get to your recap of Dynamite, not stealing your thunder too much, let's go through the main event of Collision, which is for the AEW World Title. MJF versus the cleaner Kenny Omega. MJF impressively got a moonsault suicide dive in, and he also countered the Hurricane Rana into a powerbomb backbreaker. He even hits a cradle DDT, and he's just really, really getting on top of it here. He's able to counter everything, and there's also a little bit of gamesmanship here where MJF is trying to outdo Kenny Omega. Anything you can do, I can do better. There's a massive spot with Kenny hitting a gut-wrench powerbomb off of the apron and through a table. I think that was the biggest single spot of the match. Each man, of course, hits a poison rana as well, so building into that story of MJF saying, anything you can do, I can do better. And Omega also hits a powerbomb onto the ring barricade, so not quite a buckle bomb variation that Seth Rollins hits, because this one just lands flat onto the top part, the thin part of the ring barricade. We also get, for the finish of the match, MJF hitting Panama City Sunrise, which is a reference, I think, of course, to Adam Cole from the Panama City Playboy. And he immediately follows that up with the Heat Seeker pile driver, which keeps Omega down for the champ's retention, which secures MJF's mathematical reign being the longest in AEW World Championship history. And I'll just say at the end that there were several shots being shown at the end of many meaty men watching from backstage. Samoa Joe was watching the victory. Wardlow was watching the victory. Hobbs was watching the victory. And so was Bullet Club Gold. It looks as if at his moment of triumph that all the roster has got their eye on MJF and his Triple B, which he doesn't actually have on him, which Bullet Club Gold is in possession of. However, he is the longest reigning champion, and now the only place to go really is down. So he's just got to keep that place that he's got. Potentially looking at some paranoia moving forward at some point, but with people like that, with Joe, with Wardlow, with Hobbs, and with Bullet Club Gold, it's a lot of great matches that we've got for this reign to continue. What do you reckon, Dimitri? Do you agree?
I do agree, and there's only one thing I hate in all of it, which is this kind of just reveals that MJF is sticking around with AEW. And I don't mean that as in I'm upset he's sticking around with AEW. I mean that in the sense of it'd be nice to play off that idea of, shit, is he actually going to leave? Just for that little bit, just to keep fans still in the dark.
You're referring to the bidding war of 2024.
Naturally. And it kind of feels like, I said from the beginning, he should drop the title right before. So when they announced the pay-per-view for December 30th, I thought that is a perfect place for him to just drop it. Not leave the company, but it will just add fuel to the fire of crap. Like, is he actually leaving? Is he gone? What's going on? But with all these guys, it kind of feels like, no, like you should just let him hold on to it and have him go up against all these men.
Yeah.
Like, so So it's like only in that very specific sense does it annoy me. In every other sense, it excites me.
Do you want
Uh,
to take us through Dynamite?
yeah, let's go through Dynamite.
Let's do it.
The show, as you pointed out earlier, it started with another backstage segment with Renee. This time MJF speaking to her about the main event, which he's got to find some partners. And as you pointed out, he spoke to Adam Cole via Zoom or like an online screen, who suggested Samoa Joe might be the right way to go. And then after this, it transitioned into the opening contest of the night, which was Orange Cassidy versus Claudio Castagnoli for the AEW International Championship, which Cassidy managed to retain with a Hurricane Rana pin. And then post-match, Jon Moxley came out and conducted a beatdown on the champ. So it seems like he's going after that title once more, which actually did get announced for Full Gear, I believe. Following that, the next match was the Gates of Agony and Brian Cage versus the Young Bucks and Adam Page. And the Gates of Agony and Brian Cage actually regained their Ring of Honor six-man tag team championships. They once more champions after Hangman got drawn out to the backstage area by Swerve. So that was quite surprising to me, but I'm not that bothered about the Ring of Honor Trios championships, so whatever. There was an Adam Copeland segment, which I'm going to go into a bit later because that was one of my highlights. And then a Tony Khan announcement. Tickets will go on sale for All In 1 month's time. You can go for pre-sale. You can register for pre-sale now, which I thought that's one of the dumbest hyped up announcements I've ever heard in my life. Basically,
Absolutely piss poor.
They're saying we are going to sell tickets for a show that we've already announced. Okay, great. Just make that a social media post. Make that just a passing commentary line. Who cares? But anyway.
I do agree with you.
Thank you. I feel like I was going mad at the screen. Anyway, the next match we had Cool Hand Ange and Daddy Magic go against Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega, with Chris Jericho getting the win for his team using the Judas effect. Afterwards, it was announced that he's gotten a certain big man, a giant, some might say, to join him, Omega, and Kota Ibushi in a match in a couple weeks' time against Don Callis' family. And who else but Paul White to come to the rescue for his old friend, his old Jericho friend. So that was quite nice. And then this led into another Hikaru Shida defense of her AEW Women's World Championship, this time against Willow Nightingale. Successfully, I might add. And then, yes, as you pointed out earlier, the Tony Storm interrupting again, and it seems like they're setting up some extra beef going on between those two, doesn't it?
Oh, look, it'd be great for them to just really lean into that, because by having Hikaru Shida defend the title, it's really making her look as like a workhorse champion, and it puts her in a very prime spotlight. So we've already got Tony Storm, who's like super hot right now, and having that worthy challenger, that main event level challenger going up against a worthy champion, just makes for excellent television and for excellent wrestling. So I'm a big fan of where this is heading.
Well, this led into the main event of the night, which was Bullet Club Gold going up against MJF. And as it turned out, he finally acquiesced to the request of one Max Caster and accepted the services of the Acclaimed. So that was our matchup, the main event. This was something that had been set up throughout the night with MJF trying to recruit people. And Jay White pinned MJF to win the match. I have to say, this really surprised me in a good way. But that's the first time MJF has been pinned in a little while.
Probably since before he won the title. Oh no, it was against the tag match.
There was the tag match.
Yeah.
There was the tag match, but that was a couple months ago now. So anyway, the point is, like, that's good for Jay White in terms of making him seem a bit more credible, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And just like, it was such a clean finish as well, because he made the gunshot gesture as MJF was turning around. He'd be like, I've got you, right? I know that I've got you. So that was awesome just before he hit the Blade Runner. But if I can just touch on, Dimitri, the point you said before, that MJF had various segments during the night just trying to find tag partners. I actually reflected that neither good nor bad, just a reflection that I had. it's a very WWE Raw style thing to do. And I think
Yeah,
some years ago, Stone Cold Steve Austin made a comment about it. And I think it was he at the time had made a criticism or an observation that it's not done enough, that you've got this recurring motif throughout the night leading up to the main event. And with like little segments sprinkled out there, like what's the ongoing element from the beginning to the end that someone stays tuned in for? And certainly this one did have that kind of vibe where it was like multiple segments throughout the evening that were building up to the main event's storyline. But that's my view on that. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. But you picked up on that, right?
no, yeah, I did pick up on it, and I personally just found a lot of the segments just a bit cringe, with the exception of when Wardlow had him in a chokehold against the wall and basically said, I'm coming for you." Like that one got me. I was like, "Oh, okay, I like that." The rest of it didn't really care. Especially didn't care when Jeff Jarrett and co showed up. I was like, whatever. But I want to mention a bit at the end of the match as well, just because I thought it was quite funny. Max Caster saved MJF from getting clocked with the AEW title, and this led afterwards to the four men scissoring in the middle of the ring. Now, the first part I actually thought was quite nice. The second part is leaning into this issue I have with MJF's current title reign, which is now that he's a babyface, he's doing a lot of really like funny things. That's what
Cringy stuff.
yeah. And I'm kind of like, well, this isn't the devil I've come to know and love. This isn't the scumbag I've come to know and love. You know what I mean?
Well, I actually 100% agree with you. And it's actually got me thinking now that because we did see the devil pop up on the screen during the opening segment of the night. And I guess like one easy way to pull out of that is to be like, it was MJF the whole time, and that this is his way to go back to the heel thing. But I just thought I wouldn't like to see this, but what if it was Max Caster who was actually just trying to help out MJF and do the best thing for him? It would be, I guess I would, if they did end up doing something like that, I would just get Stalker vibes, I suppose, like someone who's been backing you the whole time. And Stalker has been done well before, like when Mickey James and Trish Stratus had their storyline, but it's also been done badly before, like when Diamond Dallas Page was stalking Undertaker's wife at the time, Sarah.
When you
So
said stalker, that was the first thing that came to my mind, which
thank
was
you, right?
like, uh,
But yeah, so basically, what I'm trying to get with this is that because we're seeing the devil pop up more frequently, it makes me think about it a lot more. And because it's happening so frequently, I think about it more that it's going to be having some kind of an outcome or a reveal in November at Full Gear. I think we're very close to a reveal. I'd prefer it to be longer term, but I'm getting the impression that it's nigh. What do you think? Do you agree?
I do. I think I do agree that it probably will reveal itself in some capacity. I think the the I mean, I actually don't know what to expect, to be honest. I didn't think about the Max Caster thing, but it is possible. But I've sort of deliberately chosen to just sort of not have an opinion or a prediction on it, just to sort of see where it goes, and then I'll judge it afterwards if I think it landed. But I do want to quickly reflect on the Adam Copeland stuff as well.
Yes.
And basically, the segment now is that Christian Cage threatened to break Copeland's neck, which has lit the fire in him to attack Christian and agree to the match. I personally would have loved this if it led like I don't mind him agreeing to the match, but I would have loved it if the first time he even landed a hand on or a single finger on Christian Cage wasn't until the actual match.
Yeah. I can see that appeal. I think you're right.
And like personally, that was my only like criticism of the segment, is just that I think the only time I can recall where it was so effective doing that was the Undertaker Kane first match at WrestleMania 14. Like the fact that it was months of build before Taker even agreed to do the match. Like, and he just refused to attack his own brother. And I think in this case, like, they do have that brotherly relationship, so it could have had the same sort of emotion to it.
Do you think it takes anything away though? Like, I guess because they're going to be in a six-man tag. So you could have actually extended this idea of I don't want to touch Christian, I don't want to hurt him,
even in the
because
match.
yeah, even through the
Mm,
match, right? And then just take it further, like to the end of the year pay-per-view or to Revolution where they have a blow off. Like exactly what you said. I agree with you that should have been part of the storyline. I don't want to hurt you.
I agree. Like I think what you just said there is actually perfect. Like imagine the storytelling in the match where Christian tags in and Copeland like just freezes.
Yeah.
That would have been cool. And we'll see how it plays out. But all in all, like look, I think we're in agreement, right? We're talking about like minor gripes here. Like it should still be a good outing, and also it will still be fantastic to see the two going up against each other in the ring again.
Look, that'll be great. I mean, I do want to see them in singles action, but yes, it will be awesome to see them on opposite sides of the ring again.
Well, that that's the end of the Dynamite review. Were there any other thoughts that you have on it?
Look, I think that I'm going to be looking forward to the pay-per-view. I don't know how good it's going to be, but pay-per-view viewing on a weekend for us is always something to look forward to. And hopefully the SmackDown Go Home show is going to be more of a more entertaining than the Raw Go Home was.
Hopefully. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, as you just mentioned, Thanasi, we'll do a very brief review of SmackDown's Go Home show before we then discuss our thoughts on WWE Fastlane. So be sure to tune in. It's going to be an action-packed show, and hopefully, just maybe, we'll be talking about an LA Knight win. Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
Thanks for having me. Let's chat again next week.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. And until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.